He's one of the only attorneys in Massachusetts who has been fighting back against the COVID mandates, the vaccine mandates. He's regularly assisting you heard about the people who were going out front of Michelle Wu's house and making all sorts of noise in violation of her ordinance. They're getting arrested for protected First Amendment speech. He's one of the defenders of these individuals. He's an attorney from South Boston, I'd say, that's Boston. I'm very proud to be associated with him. He's argued in front of the highest court in Massachusetts twice now, I believe, just for COVID-related issues. The next speaker here, Attorney Bill Gens.
Thank you. I think that I addressed some of you last year, right around this time, and for those of you who don't know me, I have a law firm in Boston, and from the very beginning of this COVID hysteria, I got involved with fighting against the lockdowns. That progressed into fighting against the mask orders, which in turn progressed into fighting against the vaccine mandates, which has now essentially transformed into fighting for free speech and civil liberties because of the censorship and the arrests of people engaged in exercising their free speech rights. If you'll notice my t-shirt, it says on it, "You can't comply your way out of tyranny." And I want to, last year when I spoke, I was very much cautionary, and I'll still be cautionary about what's to come, because what's to come isn't pretty. But before I do that, I want to remind you of a power that you all have, a power that can't be taken away. Even if you're faced with a problem that you can't litigate your way out of, that you can't vote your way out of, that you can't protest your way out of, and that you certainly can't comply your way out of, you have the power to say no. And that is the greatest power that you can possess. And it doesn't take a majority of people saying no. It takes only a small committed minority to freeze up a tyrannical regime. They can't process it. And my clients who I've represented, although we have never gotten the landmark courtroom victory, we haven't lost either. Dave Blondin, Prime Fitness, was able to stay open virtually almost the entire time, and his business is doing better than it ever did before. Other people who complied aren't in business anymore. Ariana Murrell, Liberty Tax Service, not only wouldn't comply with the mask order, she banned the use of masks by anyone in her business premises and maintained that the entire time. No one's ever worn a mask in there. Now, there's been some good news, and I'll tell you about that in a second, but I wanted to read to you from a portion of a brief that we submitted to the Supreme Judicial Court over a year ago. This is before the vaccine mandates. And what the courts have done has been not just to abandon constitutional principles, they've abandoned, in Massachusetts, fundamental legal mechanisms, such as the burden of proof, such as the rules of evidence. They have, in a mad dash to support this awful regime, especially of vaccines, but of lockdowns and masks too. And this is what we submitted. Abandoning legal standards, burdens of proof and evidence can only result in the promulgation and perpetuation of fictions over fact, of superstition over real science. The coronavirus narrative has presented the courts with a plethora of such fictions and superstitions, none of them proven or provable, including that the PCR test reliably detects COVID-19, that the PCR test can distinguish COVID-19 from the flu, pneumonia, or the common cold, that the PCR test or any test can detect a so-called variant of COVID-19, that the virus spreads through asymptomatic transmission, that closing small businesses slows or stops the spread of the virus, that masks slow or stop the spread of the virus, that social distancing of 6 feet slows or stops the spread of the virus, and that putting up walls of plexiglass all over the place slows or stops the spread of the virus. Our rules of law and procedure, when applied properly, are well suited for distinguishing fact from fiction, to not giving the extraordinary force of an injunction, to silly laws based on superstition and for which the violation is harmless. This case is emblematic of the essential truth of the COVID-19 narrative and the governmental response that should have been revealed long ago, before so many businesses were destroyed and our economy waylaid. As regards the governmental emergency measures in their purported safeguarding of harm to the public interest, the emperor has no clothes. And that is the message that we have repeated for the last 2.5 years. We have challenged the government, state, local, federal, and Ann Mara Healy to come up with one scintilla of evidence that counters those assertions, and they cannot do it. This is a fiction. It is a psychological war. It is a war of corruption over truth and of fear over courage. Now for the good news. Recently, we have seen the coronavirus narrative crumbling. And we have seen some very significant actions in the courts. Liberty Counsel, which is out of Florida, had a settlement in Illinois just last week, $10 million for healthcare workers who were forced out of the job by the mandate. The state police, and I represented the dissident state, the large group, hundreds of state policemen. A portion of them got an injunction just a couple of months ago to keep their jobs. All the City of Boston employees are no longer under a compulsion to get a vaccination to keep their jobs. And injunctions have issued for the fire and police, portions of the police department. And I represent the police, the fire, EMTs, and teachers who were surprisingly a critical component of that fight and still are. Anthony Fauci has, just in yesterday's news, has been repeatedly, but now emphatically, exposed as a serial liar on virtually every aspect of coronavirus, and especially on gain-of-function research, if you believe that there is a virus. I personally don't, but there's enough room for diversity of thought here. I believe it's all psyop, and it could only work that way, but that's for another day. We have all that. We have the electoral victories in Republican primaries all throughout the country right now. All of these are positive steps. But now for the cautionary part. The forces that are at work promulgating these things, the coronavirus, is trying to store up wars, degrading our currency, attacking us with critical race theory and all these this mythology about racism, gender fluidity, climate change, one assault after another. These forces aren't done, and they're going to come at us with plenty more. I said this last summer, and then we got into the vaccine mandates. You need to prepare. You need to prepare on behalf of yourself, and you need to prepare for the fight that is to come. But it's a fight I believe that we're going to win, but not without significant casualties. But I urge you to remember this here. You can't comply your way out of it, and you can get out of it through non-compliance and by supporting and encouraging those who refuse to comply. Thank you for your time.
We're very fortunate to have lawyers like Bill on our team, and he didn't mention, I don't think, Sampson just graduated law school, so he's going to be tormenting the left with lawsuit after lawsuit, I promise you that. You know, at this time, I'd really like to thank the Rod and Gun Club for having us here. They're wonderful people, and they, you know, it's, with all the doxing and harassment that goes on today, they you know, they get a lot of garbage. They get stupid phone calls. You know, last year Antifa showed up and put spikes on the road, and the press lied about us, called us white supremacists, and all the usual garbage. It's just complete garbage. And these people are hardcore. They know we support them too. We all support our Second Amendment. It's so important. And, you know, there would be no other amendments without the Second Amendment, because that's how we back it up. And it really is, we really are under threat. If you want to see a good example of people who gave up their guns who are in big trouble now, look at Australia. Australia is a police state now. They've even banned protesting because they don't have their guns anymore. We need to hold on to those. It's super important. And we need to support the Rod and Gun Club. I hope you all come to their haunted house in the fall. It's really wonderful. Fantastic stuff. I've never seen anything like it. It's a blast. We all have so much fun. I'm going to introduce